Welcome back to the Transfer Portal CFB podcast. And thank you for those joining us on our YouTube channel here at the Transfer Portal CFB, presented by NoContextCFB. For those of you who might be new, this is our weekly off-season college football podcast, hitting you every Wednesday. Covering all the sort of things right at the top of our minds here in this never-ending college football season for us here on in the portal. My name is Brendan Heffernan. Been on here a few times, and I'm joined by my man Mark Thomas. How are you doing today, Mark?
Good, man. Tired from work, but hey, man, I'm always excited to pod with you, my brother.
Absolutely, absolutely. It was a big day for us here. At the transfer portal. Yesterday we announced our upcoming college football preview magazine, which is something that we've been in the works behind the scene for a very long time. Mark and I will both be very involved with a lot of the writing and production of that. Obviously very excited to be able to share that with all of you. Mark, how did it feel to sort of be able to really be able to speak on this project finally?
I think it's a great feeling. I know you guys have, I know Dylan and Liam has been working hard behind the scenes trying to make this happen. And for me to come on board and to be able to contribute to the magazine, man, I think it's an honor. It's definitely an honor for it.
Absolutely, absolutely. The magazine's going to include in-depth previews on all 133 FBS teams. Well over a dozen of player interviews going across of every single conference. I think it's might be over 2 dozen player interviews. I don't know. Don't want to speak on specifics, before before we go to print. Obviously, a lot can happen. But very excited. I think it's going to be a really well-rounded product. With a lot of very talented people that Mark and I are lucky to work with. Coming together and lending their passion and creativity to it. So, there will be a lot more information forthcoming on that in the coming weeks and months on how to pick up that digital magazine. But right now, we're talking about something else. We're going out to the Pac-12 as University of Colorado still plays in the Pac-12, despite what PR firms employed by a certain conference in the Southwest might want you to believe. Deion Sanders, has been the toast of the off season. That hire. Obviously, there's a lot going on. A lot of people are thinking about Colorado football that were not thinking about Colorado football this time last year. Mark, I'm curious, what you think about what year one expectation should be for this program and sort of where you see, the Deion Colorado experience sort of fitting within, the college football landscape for the next few years.
I mean, in a funny way, you could say you need to see the expectations already just off the buzz Dion has brought out that program. They're being talked about and relevant in national platform. They haven't been the talk of national relevance since we're talking the days of Bill McCartney. So
Right.
it's definitely been a long time coming for Colorado. But on the field, but when we talk about the on field product, I think yeah, just winning those games, I think this team has a on paper it has a win type of ceiling. Like they have some key pieces in Shedeur Sanders. I think
Mm-hmm.
I think coming out of high school, he was considered a Power Five level quarterback. But obviously going down
Absolutely.
to the SWAC and playing for his dad at Jackson State, obviously that, and but when you see, even though it's college football, he still played at an exceptional level.
Mm-hmm.
You say elite to a standpoint. But they get a kid like Jimmy Horn from the portal, and then bringing on Travis Hunter. Like on paper, like they have some key pieces that they compete against some teams in the Pac. But we all know in the Pac-12, any given Saturday, anything can happen in the Pac-12. We've seen Oregon lose to Cal on Friday night, ranked as a top 5 team. We haven't seen these things before, so it didn't
Mm-hmm.
get wicked. Deion's going to be definitely be shocked when he plays these games, because these are not going to just be, you're not just going to walk out there, and just
Mm-hmm.
like walk on everybody. Like, nah, This isn't that. Like
Yeah.
the Pac-12 is on the West Coast. Like people think the Pac-12 is like an afterthought pretty much. But like it's some good ball in the Pac-12.
Mhm.
Like you have to understand, especially in the North. Like you're gonna
Absolutely.
have to play Oregon. You're gonna have to play Washington. And then too, even unless you're state, you're gonna have to play Oregon State. Who Oregon State, by my eyes, they play some of the best offensive
Yeah.
line. They have some of the best offensive line play in the
No
country.
doubt.
So it's not gonna be a cakewalk for sure. So Deion's just gonna have to like. I mean, Colorado has been in the abyss for who
Yeah.
knows how long, and I just coming in there winning games, getting the fans, getting the alumni back and into the picture, boosters back into the picture. I think that right there is a successful year one.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's important, as you mentioned, to ground, all our conversations about what Colorado is going to be in 2023 and, just how bad they've been. They were probably the worst team in the FBS, or not, maybe not in the FBS, but in the Power Five, I should say, last year. One of the worst Power Five teams I remember, watching in quite some time. So there's a lot of work to be done. I think one thing, so, just in terms of expectation, I think that if they're a bowl eligible team, then that should in year one, that should absolutely be looked at as a success. And even if they're not, I don't think that necessarily tells us a ton. I think, we can see some proof of concept of that with them not necessarily, winning a ton of games in conference. I mean, they have a hard non-conference
Oh,
schedule too. If I'm
yeah,
not mistaken, I think they open at TCU, which is obviously going to be a real tough environment to come into. The
yeah,
defending playoff team. I think, obviously you mentioned what Dion's done in the portal, which is something that I think you can only expect to continue throughout his time there. Like he's going to be able to get guys there. I think no one is questioning that. I mean, they're going to be able, as you've seen, which I think is a little interesting. He's really gone into sort of the same SWAC footprint, you might say, that he would have recruited at Jackson State. Like he's pulling kids out of Louisiana, trying to pull kids out of Mississippi, that
yeah.
normally you would not expect to go to Colorado, wouldn't expect them to go to the Pac-12 at all. So that'll be interesting to see how that's sustained. I think even just from one element, though, as we talk about recruiting, that I think has been missed maybe a little bit is just from an on-field coaching instruction standpoint. Uh, Jackson State was so successful, especially like if you look at their numbers from defending the pass, like it's almost, you know, like unbelievable. I think in 2022, the teams they played were averaging like less than 4 yards an attempt passing. And obviously, there was some talent mismatch there. They got some very, very talented guys, but that's not across the board. It's not like every guy they had out there was a Power Five player. So I
Okay.
think, the staff that he put together at Jackson State that he largely brought with him to Colorado has earned the benefit of the doubt, to an extent from that coaching them up type of way that I think has been a little bit lost in the situation. But obviously, Colorado's not an especially easy job. There's a lot of natural disadvantages that they have that Dion will need to overcome. But overall, I'm feeling optimistic um, about where they're at going forward. Now, I'm curious
Mhm.
about one other thing about how you feel about this element of it. Um, obviously, when Dion left Jackson State, there was certain levels of not sure exactly what word I would use to say that, but people feeling as though Jack State was a stepping stone, the whole time to get to a bigger job. Now Colorado is not, a school that I think most people, even if you have loved Colorado football your whole life, would say that it's necessarily a destination job. I mean, in the context of Dion's coaching career so far, I mean, even if you want to stretch back to, some of the charter school stuff, I mean, how should Colorado fans be feeling, and what should their expectations be for Deion's tenure here?
I mean, they know he's a winner. I think pretty much he's
Sure.
won since. I mean, we can even go back to high school. We used down to coaching in Texas, like he won
Hmm.
the championship as offensive coordinator. Believe it or not, and
Right.
his linebacker coach at Colorado was the head coach of that team. Uh, so I think, yeah, man. I mean, I think Colorado fans should be excited, but don't overstep the boundaries, if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
Like, don't just because you got Dion, don't expect instant gratification. Like, now you can't do that. It's college football. Like, you have to take time to
Hmm.
build the program step by step. And I think but overall, Colorado fans should definitely be excited, man. I mean, it's been a long time coming. Like, to have a
Yeah,
guy with that much cachet in the game, like that don't that game. I mean, that just doesn't come around that only comes around every so often.
for
Like,
sure.
yeah, Nick Saban's won natties. Kirby's winning, but like they're not Dion. Like, you can get the best recruit in the country. I would take a guy like Corey Raymond at the University of Florida, who's
Hmm.
regarded as one of the
Absolutely.
best recruiters of all time. But he does a great job of developing DBs. He does a great job of recruiting, getting the top talent out of the state of Louisiana and Florida.
Hmm.
But he's not Dion. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
not, and no disrespect to Corey Raymond. Corey Raymond, I respect you, but like, it's not Dion. Like, your grandmother knows who Dion is. Like, when he walks into a room,
sure.
it's it's like a celebrity, but he's coming to coach a kid. So it holds a little bit more weight.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think it's going to be interesting to see. I think that when Dion enters a conference, especially, and all of a sudden, that force is something that all the other coaches, are having to recruit against. I think that that is certainly a something that Colorado has never had before. Um, and as you mentioned, uh, I think fans of that school should be prepared for, you know, I don't know if they're going to necessarily get multiple 10-win seasons out of him before he's coaching in the SEC or coaching in the Big Ten. I think that, what you mentioned as what he brings, the value of Dion, um, I think is going to be something that schools and, whatever becomes maybe the big two. I mean, before a lot of these TV deals sort of start to kick in, it's going to be difficult to predict exactly what the landscape's going to look like. But I mean, part of me, as soon as he got hired at Colorado, was this is going to be great for them for a little while. I think he's going to have success there. I just don't think you know he's going to be an institution at that school by any means. But ultimately, I think if you're in the position they've been in for, especially the last couple seasons, you take that every time,
Yeah.
to get thrust into to a stratosphere that, you haven't been before. So I think, that makes a lot of sense. Now, moving on from a new coach just got hired, talking about a coach that at least the most shall we say, riled up parts of a certain fan base wanted gone, at least
Yeah.
for a stretch of last season with Ryan Day in Ohio State. Now, I'm a native of Central Ohio, grew up in and around Columbus. I have a lot of familiarity with Ohio State. Now, I mean, how do you perceive this sort of very strange and unique space that Ryan Day finds himself in right now?
Well, I know from this past season, I know guys wanted his head on the chopping block just because you lost to Michigan. Now,
Yeah,
yeah, we're not saying like that to an average person. Oh, he just lost the game. Like, no, he lost the game
yeah,
2 years in a row. So my thing is, he does that, but at the same time, he also was a 1 point away from a national championship.
mhm,
So it's like it's a double-edged sword, kind
yeah,
of, sort of. It's like,
absolutely.
yeah, we lost these 2 games, but we were still in a position to go and potentially win a national championship. And even and if I do and if they did beat UGA, I do think they beat TCU pretty handily,
Hmm.
like UGA did. But no, man, for Ryan Day, I think it's just uh he has to change a little bit of his philosophy. He don't run the ball enough, and he don't.
Hmm.
Because at times when you watch Ohio State offensive line, like they will pass that so much. Once they get to the run game, it's like it's hard for them to move the line of scrimmage, and it's like,
Hmm.
nah, you got to like run the ball more, not necessarily run more than you pass, but you have to run it enough to where your offensive line can have a, I guess in a way, a good balance be,
Hmm.
between both scheme. I mean, between both run blocking and pass blocking, because like you have to be able to move. You got to be able to get good hand placement and all that good stuff in the run game. And I think
Hmm.
them just pass setting so much. It's like, how do we want to block again? And I think with um, like with a back like Travion Henderson, like you have to get him and
Mine. Yeah.
Maya Williams going. You have to get them guys going. Have to. Like, granted, we know you're Ohio State. You have a star-studded receiver room. We get
Hmm.
that, but this is Big Ten country. It is not 80 degrees in November, unfortunately. Like, you have to be able to have a solid ground game, and I think that's something Ryan Day needs to address coming up this season.
Yeah. I think, as you sort of outlined, I mean, I think Ryan Day is in a really, really strange and interesting position just because, a number of the things that have happened have just triggered, the the like psychosis that like lives inside of every Ohio State fan. Like it's just in like somewhere deep inside just what's happened, like how they lost to Michigan, as you mentioned, just all the talent that they've had come through there, all the NFL players that have been on their offensive line throughout Ryan Day's tenure, and then you look on the other side of Toledo, and there is like Michigan has just built their identity around just having badass guards that are gonna in theory are going to go against the top competition and are going to be able to dictate how the game's played, which is something they couldn't do against Michigan. And I think another sneaky element of it of just I think that does contribute to the sort of the frenzy around Ryan Day as it relates to the Michigan stuff is that they didn't play in 2020. They didn't play the game in 2020 and Ohio State would have kicked their ass. So the fact that, I remember, growing up, kids could tell you to like kids in my school could tell you to the day, like when Michigan last beat Ohio State, like so there's something just about the just the time, you know, even if it's not fair or not rational. Just the time it's been since they've gotten a win. I think it makes people angry. It makes people upset. And at the same time, if he were to lose to Michigan, like we're sort of talking about, if he were to lose to Michigan, they don't win the Big Ten. They're maybe a one loss team that doesn't make the playoff. Um, he would be like what he would have a winning percentage that would probably be like the best the best winning percentage a coach has ever had. But it just
Yeah.
speaks to like uh what the expectations are at that program. I mean, because when I was growing up, through the Tressel era, it was different. The expectation was to beat Michigan and was to win the Big Ten. But I think in the playoff era, after they won that first national championship or their only playoff national championship thus far, I think, that changed what the expectations are. And to an extent, like you understand it. Ohio State has the most profitable athletic department in the country. Um, it gets every player out of Ohio that they want. They've recruited very well nationally ever since Urban took over. So I think the expectation should be there. And at the same time, it feels a little silly to be, talking about, what we're talking about here. But at the same
Yeah.
time, I think, it's interesting. Like I don't know what you can point to necessarily so far that Ryan Day can really own, so far at Ohio State. Like something that you feel like, is fully his, that he built and achieved. I think there's a lot of people who are looking at him real skeptically because of that, because of, I mean, you hear all the born on third stuff. And I think there is some truth to that. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know if there's anything else that we haven't touched on with the Bucks that, I think you think is important sort of with this conversation.
I think what do they go for with this? So let's just speak hypothetical for a second. So let's just say if he has the exact same season,
Mhm.
right? He beats everybody, loses to Michigan, right? Goes to the playoff, and he wins the playoff game, but he loses the national title.
Yeah.
Like, what do you like? Do you still keep him? That's the thing. Like, do you? Because fans are so quick to fire someone when they
Mhm.
haven't really won the big. And that's a hard thing to do. Like, it is hard to win a national championship. So it's like, if you get rid of them, who are you gonna replace?
Yeah.
Who are you gonna
They don't
hire?
want Vrabel. That's who they want.
Why? 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 Vanderbilt's not going
'Cause,
anywhere. It's not. It's not hot.
yeah.
If you
I guess that would like you would
why?
sort of sever it would be a new era, it would be a new era, I think, given sort of the history between him and Urban, you know. Uh and like I understand that and also, as you're talking about, you're going from like very very chill guy, offensive coach to like I think deep down
To
in every Ohio State fan they want like you know they don't want they want to be 3 yards in a cloud of dust in a version of that, like not literally but like in a
yeah,
mentality,
right.
in a personality, in a conception of a program. I mean, I think one of the other underrated things which that a lot of Ohio that I hear from Ohio State fans um, is sort of just like questions about their development program, how they stay healthy. Like I think I mean something which is a situation I don't want to speculate too much on. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but with Jackson Smith and Jigba, potentially being healthy to come back and play in the playoffs, and for stepping away from the team, I wonder if that has something to do with levels of dissatisfaction with how his injury was handled by the team. Um, that's something I've heard from the unhinged bloggers and you know other people who have been around the program for a while, sort of bringing up that I think is interesting. I mean, I think it sort of speaks to sort of a general issue in covering college football is we understand how to pay attention to recruiting. There's a lot of people that live that life in the media. We understand how to talk about scheme. There's a lot, people get more access to film with the internet. I think that's being very thoroughly covered now. At the same time, I think a lot of development stuff is a bit of a mystery. I think it's hard for us to quantify what good development looks like a lot of times, even at blue blood programs like Ohio State. So I think that's something as I do work in this field that I'm interested to sort of find a way to sort of fill that gap. I don't know if that's something that you've thought about as well, Mark.
It's funny. Me and my buddy, we will argue about this word development all the time, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like the thing about development is recruiting. When you evaluate a kid, that's the most important part of development is
Sure.
evaluating what can he really be like. And once you understand what he's like, you bring him in. Now it's a yes or no. Do you bring him to the program? Once you get that kid in there, now it's your job to figure out how do you put this kid in the best position to succeed?
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily quote unquote develop him, but how do you put this kid in a position to impact the offense or the defense? And I
Right.
think that's something that's kind of like overshadowed a little bit because now granted, like there's a lot of coaches that do a lot of great things clinically, but at the
Sure.
same time, if you can't get that kid to run through a wall for you, like all that clinic stuff is out the window. Like if you're
Hmm.
not a master motivator or even to a higher extent a psychologist at it, like your unit, like your position group isn't going to be
Hmm.
as successful as they can. Like I look at who is a good example. I look at Bo Davis. Bo Davis at Texas, right? For the longest, Texas have been known as country clubs, soft, and this, and that in the
Right.
trenches for the longest. When Bo Davis got there, I mean, if you know anything about Bo Davis is a high energy guy,
Right.
gonna be in your mouth, like I mean, not in your mouth, but it will be in your face, like talking crazy. And it's like that's the type of guy he is. Once he got to Texas, you saw that from the video that came up.
Hmm.
When he was asking me screaming at him, like that's the type of guy he is. And I think this past season, his unit was pretty good. Like
Yeah.
they played like they wanted to play for Bo Davis. Like you saw that. So I think that's the thing about development is it's like it's not necessarily about uh drills and technique and all of that. Like once you understand as a defensive
Right.
line, once you understand LPS, lock, peek, shed, get off the
Hmm.
block, go get the ball. That's it. That's pretty much the science. Like it's
Right.
nothing. It's not too hard about it. But you just have to go like that. Coach has to just do a great job of being a master motivator and getting his guys to play for him.
Yeah. I to your point, like with defensive line, you can have four defensive ends rotation that are all 6'5" and ran a 11-second 100 or whatever in track, but if they're not moving confidently on the field,
Right.
that it's not going to be anything. So I think
No.
I really appreciate that perspective. You know, moving from one under discussed program to another. Um, where are you at right now with the Alabama Crimson Tide? I think they haven't had many seasons, like last year where they were wholly out of the playoff discussion since the playoff has been around. Or I guess some people were trying to put them in discussion, but that's neither here nor there. So
Nasty work.
nasty work. So moving forward into 2023, I mean, where are you at with that team?
I mean, it's definitely going to be a rebuild. I think last year was the team to definitely do it, but obviously they came up
Sure.
short. Losing multiple scale weapons, obviously the key to the Lamborghini was Bryce Young. Bryce Young was spectacular all last year.
Hmm.
Then you lose a guy like Jameer Gibbs, who's a special
Yeah.
talent, and then you also are losing offensive lineman Emil Core, and then you're losing the guy Tyler Steen from Vanderbilt slash
Yeah.
Alabama. Like, I mean, obviously it's Alabama. It's a situation of rebuilding and reloading.
Hmm.
I think it's going definitely going to be some philosophical changes offensively that you're going to see. They're
Yeah.
going to get back to like big bad Bama ball like we used to back in the day, like 12 personnel and try to run the
Hmm.
ball, bringing in Tommy Reese. Now
Yeah.
that's the thing too, because Tommy Reese for lack of a better, for what it is, he's got a lot of the criticism for the offensive woes at Notre Dame. Now,
Yeah.
to his defense, I will come to his defense because of this. Because it's Notre Dame, you do not have the athletes and the ball players as you do at Alabama. So
Yeah.
now we're going to see what can he do with these Ferraris and these Hellcats down here? Like what can he do with with this talent down here. So it's going to definitely going to be interesting, especially at the quarterback position because you
Hmm.
don't know, because we don't know who's going to quarterback this team. We
Yeah.
look at Jalen Miro, who's like a Lamar Jackson type, outside of the one starter in them game, which I think he played. Uh, I mean, okay, for a
Hmm.
first time starter being thrown out there like that, but with his feet, he's a playmaker, right? Now you got a top guy like Todd Simpson, who's more of a polished passer and can also make moves in the pocket and run around with his feet. So that's going to be something to look out for. I think as we progress towards fall camp, is to see like who's going to lead this offense because you got a guy
Mhm.
like Ja'Cory Brooks who's dying to make plays, dying to
Yeah.
make plays. He's going to need the ball, and somebody has to throw in the ball. Who is it? We don't
Mhm.
know.
Yeah. I think, I'm also really curious about what their offense is going to look like this year. I honestly, coming into last year, sort of expected them to use more 12 personnel than they actually ended up doing. Um, the more I've sort of sat with the Tommy Rees hire, I think I do like it for a lot of the reasons you mentioned. I mean, I think one of the his main priorities should be, from my perspective, I think the offensive line was a step down the last 2 seasons from what we've been used to from Alabama. Not that they were a bad unit, but I think the level of dominance against SEC lines that we had seen for a while. I mean, you know, the last national championship year was maybe the most talented offensive line, I think we've really seen, at least in recent memory. Um, you know, I think I've said that on this podcast before, but I think that's going to be a major challenge, especially, in the context of, as you mentioned, sort of using more tight ends, what we saw Georgia just do with, Stetson Bennett at quarterback, to be able to build like a versatile, um, and really dangerous offense based on sort of tight ends that can do a lot of different things. Be a great force sort of as the pin and pull run game, while also being a dynamic offensive weapon. They had multiple guys that you could say that about. And Alabama should be able to get those guys as well. There's no reason why they can't. They've had a lot of great, talented tight ends who've come through that school. So I think that's going to be interesting. I expect them to sort of embrace tradition in that ground and pound type of way more going forward. And as you mentioned with the quarterbacks, since Jalen Hurts, essentially, we've seen where a situation in college football where the Alabama quarterback has been among the best players in the country every single season. And so it'll be interesting to see whoever ends up taking snaps for them, whether or not that level of excellence can be sustained, and what it would look like if they were in a situation where it's not quite that, you know? So I think those are some interesting questions. I mean, as we move on from Alabama, I mean, just to have a nice little segue. You and I were talking about some of our favorite trench players, our favorite trench units. I mean, certainly in the favor of what Alabama has coming back. I'd say Dallas Turner, is going to be one of the most dynamic edge players in the country. I don't know. Have you had a chance to sort of really get into his film much?
Not much. I probably need to consider that the Bears probably gonna need an edge
Yeah,
rusher next year. So he got a first round pick, so I think he
yeah.
might be a guy I need to look at.
He's awesome. Yeah, he's awesome. I mean, he's sort of I think if we're talking about it, I think he's going to be really interesting from a draft perspective, just based on, he lined up a lot of different places for Alabama since he's been there, but
Mhm.
is obviously a very talented, very like bendy edge rusher and just a great player. I mean his 2021 season was really awesome. And I think, he is the guy, maybe if I'm breaking down the whole Alabama roster for me, that just stands out the most, as the guy I'm most excited to see next year. And I think the
Mhm.
guy that they're going to need to hold, um, to carry a heavy load for them, and to sort of be a main leader and a main centerpiece of what they're doing. But I mean, who else sort of all around the country in terms of units for teams and in terms of individual players are you sort of looking at to sort of have that level of impact next year, both sides of the
So,
trenches?
so I'm going to stay in the SEC. I'm going to talk D line here for a second. We're going to go back to the national champions, Georgia. It's a few kids that I want to. All right.
Yeah,
There's a
absolutely.
few kids I want to take a look at. Um, young guys too who stepped up a little bit, but I want to see how like with it being with the full play on them, I want to see how they're gonna take it. So Bear Alexander knows, and then I want to take a look at my Kel Williams. I think those guys are gonna be like another dominant piece to a national championship potentially. Like that there, I know coming out of high school, like Mikael was the number one recruit in the country. He was very dominant, long, kind of
Hmm.
rangy a little bit, long arms. Fit the run. He plays the run really well. Then Ben Alexander's just a big dude who can move, kind of like a throwback Alabama guy, like
Hmm.
the Terrence Cody's and the Deron Paynes. Like
Right.
he reminds me of those a little bit. Um, like big physical presence, two gap nose, fits plays the run very well. Does a good job of keeping the offensive line off those linebackers and letting those linebackers flow to the ball. So that's definitely some two individuals who I think uh, I'm looking forward to watching next season.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, even just as a final note on the SEC, a team that I've really, really enjoyed sort of the kind of overall arc of with how they've been building up their defensive line has been the University of Tennessee. Now, I'm not necessarily putting them in the same class, certainly as Georgia, from next year. I'm not saying that I necessarily expect them to be um, dominant, dominant, dominant. But I'm a big fan of how they've sort of improved that position group, with their recruiting. They had a lot of really big wins with recruits on the edge. I believe that Tyler Barron is going to be back. He's listed on the 2023 roster. That's awesome. He's a very good player. What's the fellow name? Johns Joshua Joseph. Yeah. Yeah, he was a rotational guy for them last year, but he was one of, super blue chip edge rusher. They've had a few of those guys, a really big win. They got the number one player in Tennessee um, this year. I mean, you'd imagine them to get that guy, but another um, really good defensive end in sort of their class of 2023 is coming. So I think, with their defensive line coach, Rodney Garner, is a guy I'm a huge, huge fan of. I mean, he's a very, very verified, like legendary teacher of defensive lines. He was defensive line coach at Georgia in the early 2000s, late 90s, when they had like Richard Seymour and a whole bunch of pros come through there. He's a defensive line coach for Auburn for a long time, an assistant head coach, recruiting coordinator, a whole bunch of positions throughout the SEC. Um, you know, and I think when they won the national championship, so brought in Nick Fairley, all that. And I think he's a guy that I actually wanted Georgia Tech to take a look at and hire for their open head coaching position. Um, and so I
Yeah.
think like
Yeah.
they've got, they've got a lot to like look forward to in that position group going forward. Um, Beyond that, switching to the other side of the ball, I feel like I'm being a little a little predictable talking about SEC defensive lines and taking a break and talking
Yeah.
about Big Ten offensive lines. But I've spent, the last little while thinking a lot about what Michigan is going to look like next year. I think they might be even better than, they've been the last 2 years. I think that they've done a lot of really, really great things there. Um, they brought in some high level transfers to the offensive line. I'm a little biased, just as my brother was offensive line coach at Stanford the last couple years. But Drake Nugent, the center, multi-year starter at Stanford, I think he was a really, really good player and a really huge addition. Um, for their team. I think he's going to be able to slot in. Obviously being the guard at Michigan next year is a pretty good gig. um, Being
Yeah.
in between the potentially certainly the best guard combination in college football. I think you can put both of those cats in the conversation for best overall interior offensive lineman in college football. Beyond that, they went and got another Stanford guy who might not even start next year, Miles Hinton, who is a guy just to think about and pay attention, even if he's taking a little gap year after being a 2-year starter at Stanford, because I think he's a
Yeah.
guy who has all the tools to be a top 15 pick. He's got like 38-inch arms. Obviously his dad and his brother were very high level draft selections on the offensive line. Um, and I think he showed a lot of improvement last year. So I mean, I think Michigan is, what they've done, sort of building their team through the trenches, really on both sides of the ball, but especially on the offensive line, I think is really commendable. And I think it'll be an interesting case study for other blue bloods, in the future who are looking to sort of get back onto the national scene, after little downturns.
For sure. Yeah, I think I'm gonna say right in Big Ten country. I'm gonna stick with Penn State. Obviously last year they had a phenomenal season last year.
Mhm.
Um, with those running
Awesome.
backs. Uh, Jesus, Nick Nick Singletary. Jesus, I don't know how this name is over here. Nick Singletary and Kaytron Allen, like two true freshmen balling out last year. It's because of the offensive line. But the offensive line starts with man, very young, talented kid, left tackle, Olu Fashanu.
Mhm.
He could have came out this year's
Yeah,
draft.
would have been like top
I don't know
15
why.
probably.
I don't know why he didn't. The NIL must be great,
Must
great
be
up there, happy Valley.
crazy.
So, because
Must be
if it was
nice.
me, I know I wouldn't. I'm no. I wasn't coming back to college. Absolutely not. But no, man. But this offensive line played very well
Mhm.
all throughout the season. They grew. They got better as the season progressed. A lot of downhill running, a lot of inside zone. I think those guys
Mhm.
did a great job. Even the Ohio State game, like you saw, like how they were able to match the physicality of Ohio State's defense, and that came down to the riot. But those guys made plays. I mean, obviously, offensive line, a lot of
Mhm.
people not watching the old line, but they've done some great things in the pin and pull scheme.
Right.
I think running that GT counter and
Mhm.
running that power that they like to run. I think they did a great job of that. But I'm gonna go back to Olu. I think Olu is going to be a top five, potential top 10, top
Mhm.
five pick next year.
Yeah.
Um, the way his athleticism is very smooth. The way he moves in pass protection, he's able to anchor, be able to get a good
Yeah.
anchor. Get speed rushers. I don't know if you guys. I don't know if you watched him and JTT go at it the Ohio State
Mhm.
game. He
Yeah.
did a great job of neutralizing him, even though JTT dominated and pretty much just balled out there. He took over the game by himself as a D lineman. I've never seen
Mhm.
anything like it. But Olu, for the most part, did a great job of neutralizing him whenever he was lined up on him. So yeah, he's definitely going to be this Penn State offensive line returning four
Yeah.
of the five starters from last year. I think they're definitely going to be a team to look out for in the Big Ten East, and
Yeah.
potentially could win the Big Ten championship.
Yeah, I think I'm also pretty high on, Penn State at this moment, and I think a lot of that does have to do with Olu. I think he's the offense lineman I'm probably most excited to watch throughout next year. Another guy who's sort of catching some of that, way too early first round buzz for next year. Still trying to fit it. I've still got deadlines to finish on profiles for this year's draft. But I think Joe Alt from Notre Dame had a really really strong sophomore season at Notre Dame. I haven't had a chance to sort of get into his tape too much, but I've rewatched a few of their games, and he was really impressive. Um, as a tackle and as someone who's I think is going to be on most preseason All-American lists. I think he's a really good player, and I'm looking forward to watching him next year as well. Just to touch on another defensive lineman, um, out of University of Cincinnati, a guy who I think is a little bit unknown to a lot of people. I would say, Cincinnati didn't get a ton of attention last year. They but they've got a interior defensive lineman. They're sort of space eater. They obviously ran a lot of light boxes last year, as they have throughout Luke Fickell's tenure there, and a young man named Dante Corleone. Um, he's got some fun NIL thing with like a Godfather thing going on. I don't remember what the tagline is exactly. If he's like, it's like the sack father or some shit like that. But they have a lot of fun with him. But he's a really great player, and I think something we've seen that's been a lot of fun in the Big 12 is there have been some really great interior defensive linemen that have come out of that conference. And as UC, sort of looks to transition and sort of live in that world, I think having him, at least for the first year of that transition, is going to be really huge. But he's a guy who could potentially play himself out of college after 1 year, and he's also a great story. He's a local kid. I'm pretty sure he went to Coleraine High School in Cincinnati, on the west side of Cincinnati. Have to double check that. But that he was not a particularly sought after recruit. He was like a low 3-star. Didn't have Coleraine High School, west side of Cincinnati. Didn't have a super super long offer sheet. But he's a guy who they brought in, redshirted for a year, and then it's been just an ass kicker for them. So I think the model that Cincinnati has to be a really solid Power 5 program is in taking guys out of their area, which has some of the best high school coaching in the country, and taking those overlooked guys and getting a lot of value out of them. So I think that he should be the poster child for that, and the poster child for what Scott Satterfield should look to do in terms of continuing the momentum that Luke Fickell built there, and continue exploring the deep inroads that he built with in-state recruiting at Cincinnati. Now, are there any other guys that you haven't mentioned before we get out of here that we got to give some love in this trench celebration?
I want to go back down to SEC country, go down to Louisiana State University. We're going to get some love to Mason Smith. I know Mason, he
Yeah.
tore his ACL. I mean, it was a sad situation, but I think he has the upside to come back and have a major season. I think if the ACL is good and he comes back and has a dominant season, I think he will be calling the family. I think he will be entering the NFL draft after this year. So, I mean, long, powerful, strong,
Mm-hmm.
6'5", about 300. Man, can fast off the ball, is very explosive. I know LSU is known
Yeah.
for having those athletic freaks in the trenches, so he's not
Yeah,
going
he's
to
that guy.
surprise anyone. But he's definitely going to be a playmaker for Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers next year. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how he progresses coming season.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it has been another wonderful recording of the Transfer Portal CFB podcast. Happy to get in, touch on, give some love to big guys. Both you and I have focused on that a lot in our writing. Have a deep, deep passion for that. So we're happy to share that. Are you working on anything right now for the site? Any writing that folks should be looking out for?
So I got a couple. I'm still working on the magazine right now.
Right.
I just shot out a couple articles. Well, one article I'm working on right now. I'm basically trying to come up with like a little series called the case. Talking about giving a case as to each quarterback why they should be the starting quarterback for
Nice.
their team. So I did Auburn already. You guys go
Right.
check that one out right
Yeah, that's a
now.
great piece.
Um, thank you. And I'm also working on a few more. So I mean, it's gonna come. It's gonna be like I want to try to make it a weekly thing, try to maybe do two. I want to shoot for two, 2 or 3 a week, but we'll see how my schedule goes. But definitely be on the lookout for those.
Nice. And where can folks find you online?
You can find me. I'm only on Twitter at @markmoney__.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I'm plugging away still. Got some more offensive line draft profiles coming down the pike.
Okay.
In between my school responsibilities that keep me out the darkened room with my with my little all 22 collection. But yeah, be on the lookout for that. You can find me on Twitter at Hef the Reporter. That's no spaces, HEFF the Reporter. Um, and thank you all for joining us once again. And looking forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Have a good one.
You too. Let's go.